Two defense contractors, one from the US and one from Europe, have teamed up to produce a new howitzer round that could make artillery the dominant arm of land warfare. The Ramjet 155 artillery shell can not only range out as far as 44 miles, it can lock onto and destroy moving targets. The shell, currently under testing, would allow US and NATO armies to strike targets while safely out of range of Russian and Chinese artillery. The latest Ramjet 155 test, announced by Boeing and Nammo this week, was conducted on June 28 at the Andøya Test Center in Norway. The shell's Ramjet engine ignited successfully and it demonstrated flight stability with a well-controlled engine combustion process. For more than 2 decades, artillery technology has been a relatively low priority for the US military. The post-9/11 emphasis on guerrilla wars and fighting against low-capability adversaries like the Islamic State and the Taliban has reduced the need for powerful, long-range artillery. The US Army and Marines, lacking a credible enemy artillery threat, have been able to operate with impunity, setting up protected artillery sites without too much concern for enemy artillery fire, with airstrikes filling the gap to hit very long-range targets. The shift back to big power conflict is changing that. US ground forces must once again contend with fighting large armies with high-tech weaponry, ensuring that American equipment is technically superior to those fielded by potential adversaries. Aircraft attacking very long-range targets have the potential to be shot down in the process, losing a pilot and $100 million aircraft. The artillery war between Ukraine and Russia, with both sides pounding away with hundreds of howitzers and multiple launch rocket systems daily, is a brutal, real-world reminder of the power of artillery and what happens to losers in an artillery duel. The shift back to big power conflict is changing that. US ground forces must once again contend with fighting large armies with high-tech weaponry, ensuring that American equipment is technically superior to those fielded by potential adversaries. Aircraft attacking very long-range targets have the potential to be shot down in the process, losing a pilot and $100 million aircraft. The artillery war between Ukraine and Russia, with both sides pounding away with hundreds of howitzers and multiple launch rocket systems daily, is a brutal, real-world reminder of the power of artillery and what happens to losers in an artillery duel. Most artillery shells are sent downrange by the detonation of a propellant charge in the breech of the gun. The charge creates pressure behind the shell, which then pushes the shell out of the barrel and downrange to the target. More propellant can mean more range, but at a certain point that becomes dangerous. Instead, some shells inject a gas into their wake, reducing drag as the shell flies through the air, a method called base bleed. Other shells, so-called rocket-assisted projectiles, RAP, use actual rocket engines to fly farther. The new Ramjet 155 shell, jointly developed by Boeing and Norwegian defense company Nammo, is the first artillery shell to use a ramjet for propulsion. The shell has been in development since 2019, when the Army funded it as part of the XM1155 Extended Range Artillery Projectile Program. Ramjets are air-breathing engines that suck in air at high speeds and then mix it with gases produced by fuel combustion. The air and exhaust under pressure is then expelled through the rear nozzle, producing thrust. A ramjet-powered shell has a few advantages over base bleed and RAP technology. 1. The shell uses the oxygen in the air itself as a propellant, and there's plenty of oxygen in the atmosphere. This reduces the amount of onboard fuel the shell needs. Second, unlike the other types of shell propulsion, the ramjet shell can accelerate over a greater distance, giving it greater speed up until impact. Of course, a ramjet shell does have some disadvantages. For one, the addition of a ramjet engine makes it much more expensive than a typical artillery shell. 2. The shell must incorporate a guidance package, steering fins, and the ramjet, reducing the shell's explosive payload.